The Right Church, From a Seeker to a Finder. Written by Peter Hoover of Ontario, Canada, in the late 1970s. Published in 2021 by Metamorphose Publishing of Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, USA. Chapter 5 of 16. The Wind Picks Up. All of southern Ontario, around the lakes, and out the St. Laurent through Montreal and Quebec, becomes the most beautiful part of the world in fall. One just has to stop, pull off one's cap, and worship God. I love to plow, straight black furrows through incredibly rich soil. Our old Super 90 Massey easily pulling 5 shares through our perfectly square fields with 1,000 gulls screeching and squabbling behind me. Golden and russet leaves, perfectly balanced, majestic in their haunting calls. Long V's of Canada geese passed over us headed south. I thanked the Lord for fall, but with winter coming, and with all of our cities along the lakes gearing up for snow, the Taves family turned to their greenhouse with renewed vigor. Once the plowing lay behind us, and even before we brought the cattle in for good, I found myself back in the pleasant jungle environment and good company I had learned to enjoy so much under glass. Randy almost startled me when he came with a grin to welcome me back. He looked a bit different now with a mustache. "What kept you busy?" he asked me, once we had a chance to talk. I knew he wanted to learn more from me than just our work on the farm. "I am learning things," I told him, "but not from school." "Oh yeah?" He sounded interested. "I'm reading a lot," I explained. "Did you ever hear of Eberhard Arnold, a German guy who got converted and started a Christian community?" "Who do you mean?" He glanced at me from the other side of the row. "The very people that sang at the high school not long ago?" "That's it," I said. "Eberhard Arnold founded the Society of Brothers and also wrote lots. Much of it has been translated to English, and old Rudolph loaned me a number of their books." "What do they tell you? Anything new or different?" "Tell you what," I suddenly got an inspiration. "I have one of them out in the truck, and at break time I'll read you some pieces." We discussed much, and Randy did not find it silly. In fact, our break time grew dangerously long as he sipped slowly from his thermos, and I read. "Now is the hour. The colossal need facing humankind in this hour of history makes it urgent to show a new way. The time is here for the communal church to be a light on the lampstand, a city on a hill. The reality of the God-given life amongst us must affect many, and finally all people. The time is here when the message of God's unity, justice, and brotherhood in His kingdom must be spread abroad. But we are exceedingly weak, and our numbers are small, very small, when we think of the magnitude of this calling." "Wow," Randy exclaimed. "He gets a lot said." But I kept right on reading. "We cannot evade the call of Jesus or the impulse of our hearts. It is a call that goes out to all, especially to all the needy. And when the misery reaches such a pitch as we see around us today, the call of Jesus becomes all the more insistent and pressing, more so than ever before. Go ye out into all the world. Go out, get to work, call the people, and gather them in. Now is the hour." Reaching over to take the book, Randy started reading out loud while I finished my biscuits and tea. He read, "The great tidings entrusted to the Church of Christ must be brought to everyone without exception. Everyone should hear it. That does not mean that everyone is expected to join the communal Church of Christ at this particular time. It does mean, though, that the message of truth shall reach every single human being. Unity in Christ, as it is shown in the life of the communal church, is the goal of humanity, and this message will leave its mark in the depths of every heart, whether or not a person is ready today for the Church of Christ." Eberhard Arnold's writings intrigued us. We read more and more of them and discussed them a lot, but some of them seemed strange both to Randy and to me, like foreign territory or a road we have never tried before. Did this German man know what he was talking about? Back at home, Nellie read the same pieces and caught the drift. The following Saturday, while I worked with Dad on digging out a root cellar under the side of our barn hill, I kept on thinking and praying. Was living in communal peace the real and correct demonstration on earth of God's reign in the heavens? I began to think it might be, and Randy seriously considered it, although it did not match at all with what both of our churches taught. Personally, I wondered if this might be what God expected of me in order to get out of our messy and discouraging situation here at home. Returning to the house for a drink while we dug out the cellar, I found Nellie alone and asked her, "What do you think? Old Rudolph has been asking me if we would like to go with him to visit the communities in New York and Connecticut. He said they were holding a conference out at the Evergreen community in Connecticut, and he told me we would learn an awful lot there." "Oh," Nellie's face lit up. "I'd love to go. Could we?" Typically, Nellie became even more excited than I in the prospect of such a trip. "All we need," she assured me, "was our birth certificates to get across the boundary, right? It can't be very far to go. No more than a few hours." All manner of plans got made within a few hours while Dad and I kept on working in the root cellar. Somehow, I got the feeling he was just as sick of our current church situation as we young people were, and I knew that both Mom and Dad felt bad for us. They knew we had no real future here. For several days, Dad seemed cautiously enthused. Mom was far more curious than anything else. What would you do there? With whom would you stay? How long would it take? What happens if you like it there and decide to stay? All sorts of questions that only moms can come up with. "Not much to worry about," I assured her. "I'm certain they'd feed us well and give us decent beds. And as far as staying there, you don't need to get concerned. We Canadians couldn't even live there if we tried." "Aha," Nellie chipped in a bit too eagerly for Mom's taste. "Old Rudolph told us that after the program at WBI, 2 conference Mennonite girls got excited about living in community, and as Canadians they got shipped off to England. They have another community there, and we could just as easily live at that place too. We're British." I called Rudolph Weinhardt, trying not to sound excited, and he was overjoyed. He drove up to our place at once and gave me another book to read. "You need to read this before you meet the community itself. It will explain everything." To be sure, it did. For the first time after I grew up and became a man, I found myself wiping my eyes repeatedly as I read the book upstairs, hours and hours after the rest of our family had settled down to sleep. John Horsch wrote the book. He came from Bavaria in Germany, growing up a short distance from where Eberhard Arnold and his wife founded the Society of Brothers in the adjoining province of Hesse. He knew Eberhard Arnold well, and John's dad, a Mennonite preacher who started the Horsch farm equipment business, knew the community from its beginning. Now John, a professor at Goshen College in Indiana, wrote this story, not only about the Society of Brothers, but also about the Hutterite movement itself, the group Eberhard Arnold joined. The book moved me deeply. Such amazing stories of faithful Christians digging themselves into the ground, entire fellowships in fact, to avoid persecution. People that suffered so much, so courageously in spite of all odds, constantly sending out missionaries, publishing books, starting schools to share the light. But then, the tragedy of thousands falling away and giving up the faith when no end of suffering seemed forthcoming. I cried for all those that gave up, yet the faithfulness of those who persisted made me all the more determined to stick it out, to keep on looking for the truth and clinging to Christ no matter what. Our situation here in Canada, very different of course, also seemed hopeless. But should we give up and stop trusting God? I felt my life changing, my values shifting, and somehow I liked it. But a week later, Dad came, a bit sad and apologetic, to tell me, "I'm sorry. Mom and I have decided that it's probably not a good idea for us to let you go to Connecticut. At least not right now. We need you here at home. What would we do without you right now in this difficult time?" Grudgingly, I caught his point, but I did not like it. Back at the milk house that night, I told Nellie, "You know what? I'll submit and be nice. I'm only 17. But unless things change here at Dorchester, and I mean unless things change drastically and totally, fast, I'll be out of here, soon." Nellie clasped my arm. "And I'll go with you," she told me. Rudolph Weinhardt, when he found out about the change of plans, was upset. "What does your dad think?" he asked me. "Leaving you stuck amongst a whole bunch of wealthy Mennonites and Tunkers that can't get along one with another? What's that for a life?" I didn't know. But instead of fussing and fuming, I began to read another book that Rudolph loaned me. It also came from the Society of Brothers, yet the author, Art Gish, belonged to the Church of the Brethren, the more contemporary version of the German Baptists we had met at the Stricklers. Beyond the Rat Race. The title caught my attention right away when I saw it, but now, as I leafed through it, I saw all sorts of provocative subtitles. So what's wrong with being rich? Possessions cause us to become dependent on them. They have addictive power. Affluence is the new opiate of the people. Today, it is basically not religion that is used to keep people subservient to the system, but consumer affluence. Wealth does not satisfy. Gaining new possessions stimulates the desire for still more. Wow, I told myself, this book would definitely travel with me to work. The following day, back in the lunchroom, Randy scanned through the titles in the book and just as eagerly started to quote pieces here and there. Materialism is a diversion. Affluence distracts us from the more important aspects of life, from seeking first God's kingdom. Affluence makes us forget God. It leads to neglect of the spiritual by absorbing the energies of the Spirit and hardening our hearts. This is amazing, Randy exclaimed. Who actually is Art Gish? Do you know? He's a Brethren man and lives in Pennsylvania, I told him. That's all I know. Wealth creates an illusion of security. Wealth encourages false values. As affluence affects consciousness, it transforms and perverts values and standards. Wealth creates barriers between people. Money and private property separate us from our brothers and sisters and destroy a sense of community among people when some have more than others. Randy kept reading until suddenly he glanced at the clock. Hey, we've got to get back to work. This is just too good. Have you read it all? Not yet, I told him, but I have much to think about. Quickly before we left the lunchroom, we were the only ones left. He read a bit more. One cannot be wealthy without stealing from others. If everyone possessed only what was needed, no one would be in poverty. Wealth makes us fearful and defensive. Our inner selves become so entangled with our possessions that any attack on them is considered an attack upon us. Excessive wealth and inequality are basic causes of the violence in our world today. Later, whenever we met during the afternoon, we had things to exchange. What really strikes me, Randy told me, is what Gish writes about God's creation. He says, affluence causes pollution. Our ecological crisis is a direct result of the way we live. Just think, he said, of all the chemical waste that flows into the Great Lakes from Chicago and Detroit. No wonder that we cannot eat fish out of our lakes anymore. Even more seriously, I added, is what he says about war. It's not hard to see the link between how we live and this current Cold War. Driving home from work, even though our small town of Dorchester, with its surrounding farms, its extensive fruit orchards and vineyards, I was forced to admit that as beautiful as our area looked, everything revolved around money. And we, old order Mennonites, did not stand out as any exception. All of our local farms, I knew, represented a fortune. We were rich and selfish, and we couldn't even get along one with another. What are we accomplishing? One of the songs I had learned at the greenhouse described the Laodicean church. Did we, right now, live in Laodicea? More things to discuss with Nellie during chore time, and more to consider and pray about while I read my tracts from Kansas, my River Brethren books. I had just gotten another one, written by a man called Laban Breckbill, along with my Eberhard Arnold stuff, and who knows what all more in my growing collection of must-reads up in my room. That my life was changing, I did not doubt for a moment. But when would it stop? Or where? At this time, I sort of enjoyed it, steadily changing ideas as more light came. More exciting, I found it, than disturbing. New terms for new concepts. What do they all involve? Technology, capitalism, and the consumer society. Thankfully, in spite of its small-town sleepiness, Dorchester had a decent library. Surprisingly large, all things considered, and I used it all through school, its shining crown being its set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Through Dad's encyclopedia, he had a set of Britannicas on his shelves in his study, and the more I read from them, the more fascinating I found them. I read everything I could find about Adam Smith, from England, his concept of laissez-faire economics, and the current socialism coming into Canada full tilt. Dad did not like it much, although he did sign up for Medicare. So much to think about. Strong winds than ever, blowing every which way. What's a guy supposed to make of it all? I asked myself, almost irritably. Instead of finding any quick answer, after the evening meal and chores, I went to bed, trying hard to tune out, to stop thinking, in order to simply go to sleep. I had acquired a headache.